worked the carnival circuit from 2018 to 2021. Started when I was 19 and broke. Figured it'd be an adventure. Traveled all over the Midwest and South setting up rides, running games, the whole thing. The money was decent if you didn't mind living in a trailer and moving every week. Here's something most people don't know about carnival work. Nobody asks too many questions when you show up looking for a job. Half the guys I worked with were using fake names. Some had warrants, some were hiding from ex-wives. Some just wanted to disappear for a while. Management didn't care as long as you showed up and did the work. Background checks were basically non-existent. I worked with this guy, Danny, for almost 3 seasons. That probably wasn't his real name, but that's what everyone called him. He was maybe 45, quiet, and kept to himself most of the time. Nothing too unusual about that. Lots of carnival workers are loners. But there were things about Danny that always felt off. First thing I noticed was how he acted around families. Most of us would joke around with the kids, help parents get their toddlers on the kiddie rides, that kind of thing. It's part of the job. But Danny would get this tense look whenever families with young kids came around. He'd find excuses to walk away, or suddenly need to check something on the other side of the midway. Danny always volunteered for the breakdown shifts too. After the fair closed each night, we'd start tearing down rides and packing equipment. Most guys hated that work. It was hard and you were usually exhausted by then. But Danny seemed to prefer it. He'd stay behind cleaning up while everyone else went to grab beers or whatever. He never talked about his past either. In 3 years, I never heard him mention where he was from, any family, old jobs, nothing. If someone asked direct questions, he'd just change the subject or walk away. A few guys tried to get him to open up when he was drinking, but Danny barely drank at all. The thing that really stood out was how he knew things about the towns we'd visit. We'd roll into some random place in Missouri or Arkansas, and Danny would know exactly where the good diners were, which parts of town to avoid, stuff like that. When people asked how he knew, he'd just say he'd been through before. In July 2021, we were setting up outside Tulsa for a week-long fair. Everything seemed normal until Wednesday morning when Danny just wasn't there. His trailer was empty, truck was still parked outside, keys on the counter like he stepped out for a minute and never came back. This was weird because Danny never left his truck. It had all his tools and personal stuff. The supervisor didn't seem surprised when I mentioned Danny was missing. Just said something about how some people wear out their welcome, and told me and another guy to clean out Danny's trailer before we moved to the next spot. When I asked if we should call the police to report him missing, the supervisor got this look and said Danny probably just caught a ride with someone else and would pick up his truck later. But we both knew that didn't make sense. Inside the trailer was mostly regular stuff. Clothes, some tools, and a hot plate. But under the bed, we found this old duffel bag. Inside were newspaper clippings, lots of them, all missing persons cases, mostly kids between like 8 and 14. The articles were from different newspapers going back maybe 10 years. What really freaked me out was that a lot of them were from towns we'd hit that season, or the season before. There was this one article about a 12-year-old girl who disappeared from a county fair in Tennessee. We'd been at that exact fair 6 months earlier. Another one about a boy who vanished from a festival in Arkansas. We were there the same weekend. I counted at least 8 cases that lined up with places we visited. Some of the clippings were really old and yellow, from newspapers in towns I'd never heard of. But others looked recent, like Danny had been cutting them out and adding them to the collection. A few still had dates written in the margins in Danny's handwriting. I showed the other guy and we both kind of freaked out. We talked about calling the police, but when I brought it up to the supervisor later, he pulled me aside and said it would be better if we just forgot about Danny and moved on. Said the carnival had a reputation to maintain, and getting cops involved would just cause problems for everyone. The way he said it made me think maybe other people have figured out what Danny was up to. Maybe that's why Danny's truck was still there, but he wasn't. In that line of work, people handle problems their own way sometimes. But the timing was too weird to ignore. All these missing kids from towns where our carnival had been, and Danny always working the late shifts when fewer people were around, always avoiding families during the day. I quit the next week. I couldn't stop thinking about those clippings and wondering what really happened to Danny. The other guy quit too. Neither of us wanted to ask too many questions about where Danny went. I've thought about those articles a lot over the past couple years. Part of me wonders if Danny was just some true crime obsessive who collected that stuff as a hobby. But the way he acted around kids, the way he knew those towns, the timing of everything, it all felt connected. The thing that really bothers me is that Danny had been doing this for years before I started working with him. But maybe someone finally figured it out. In that world, people don't always go to the cops when they find out someone's been hurting kids. They handle it themselves. I wonder if Danny's truck is still sitting in some impound lot in Tulsa, or if the supervisor eventually had it moved to a secret spot. I never tried to find out. Some things are better left alone. I sometimes search online for missing kids from towns where I know carnivals were set up, just to see if there are any new cases. I haven't found anything definitive, but there are always a few that make me wonder. If you have kids and take them to country fairs or traveling carnivals, just keep an eye on them. I'm not saying all carnival workers are dangerous. Most of the people I worked with were decent folks just trying to make a living. But places like that attract people who want to stay anonymous, and there's not much oversight. I never found out what happened to Danny or what his real story was. Maybe I'm wrong about everything and he just was a weird guy with a morbid hobby who decided to skip town. But I don't think so. And honestly, if my suspicions were right, I'm not sure I want to know what happened to him. I worked for a traveling carnival company we'll call Midwest Amusements from 2019 to 2022. Started as general labor setting up games and food stands, but after my first season they moved me to ride operations. Better pay and you got to interact with customers instead of just hauling equipment around all day. The zipper was always my least favorite ride to operate. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a tall metal wheel with about 24 cars that flip and spin as the wheel turns. Each car holds 2 people and has a door that's supposed to lock shut. The whole thing looks like a giant spinning torture device, which honestly isn't far off. Our zipper was old, really old. The ride itself was probably from the late 80s and it showed. Paint was chipped everywhere, metal was rusted in spots, and half the safety decals had worn off years ago. But it was popular with teenagers and made good money, so management kept it running. The problem was the door latches. There were these spring-loaded mechanisms that were supposed to click shut and stay locked until the ride stopped. But on our zipper, probably 6 or 7 of the 24 cars had latches that would randomly pop open during the ride. Not every time, maybe once every few cycles, but often enough that we all knew about it. I brought this up to my supervisor, Frank, during my second week running the ride. He just shrugged and said they'd been dealing with it for years. His solution was to station me, and another operator at opposite ends of the ride platform to watch for doors coming open. If we saw one pop, we'd hit the emergency stop and get the people out safely. This seemed insane to me, but Frank explained that getting replacement parts for a ride that old would cost thousands of dollars and probably take weeks to arrive. We'd lose money every day the ride was down. He said as long as we stayed alert and stopped the ride when needed, nobody would get hurt. So that became our routine. 2 operators watching constantly, emergency stop button always within reach. We probably had to stop the ride 4 or 5 times a week for pop doors. We'd tell customers there was a minor technical issue, get them off safely and restart with different cars. Most people didn't think much of it. The close calls were terrifying though. Picture someone hanging upside down, 30 feet in the air when the door suddenly swings open. We'd slam that emergency stop so hard I'm surprised we never broke it. A few times people's phones or wallets would fall out when doors popped, but we always managed to stop before anyone fell. This went on for almost 2 years. Frank kept promising he'd order parts, but there was always some reason to wait. Business was slow, or we were between seasons, or corporate was being tight with money. The zipper kept running with its broken latches and us frantically watching for problems. Then in August 2021, we were set up at a county fair in Missouri. Really busy night, long lines for everything. I was running the zipper with a new guy named Marcus who just started that week. I was training him on what to watch for, how to spot a door that might pop, all of that. About halfway through the evening, we loaded up a family. Mom, Dad, and their daughter, who was maybe 13 or 14. They got into car number 18, which was one of the problem cars, but I'd run that car earlier with no issues. I did my usual safety check, made sure their door was locked tight, and started the ride. Everything was normal for the first few rotations. Then I saw it happen in what felt like slow motion. Car 18 came upside down and the door just swung wide open. The girl was only held in by her seatbelt, dangling 35 feet up with nothing but air below her. I hit the emergency stop button immediately, but these rides don't just instantly halt. It took maybe 15 seconds for car 18 to rotate back to where we could reach it, and those were the longest 15 seconds of my life. The girl was screaming, her parents were screaming, other riders were yelling. I thought for sure I was about to watch someone die. Marcus and I got them down as fast as we could. The girl was shaken up but physically fine. Her parents were furious and demanded to know what happened. Before I could say anything, Frank appeared out of nowhere with this big apologetic smile. He immediately started explaining how these things happen sometimes, how carnival rides have built-in safety systems, how she was never in real danger because of the seatbelt. He was smooth about it, made it sound like a freak accident instead of something we'd been dealing with for 2 years. Then came the part that still makes me sick. Frank pulled the family aside and offered them free passes to everything, all rides, all games, and all food. He said the carnival company really valued their understanding and hoped this wouldn't ruin their night. The parents were still angry, but the free stuff seemed to calm them down. Frank asked them not to mention the incident to other families because it might cause unnecessary panic about ride safety. He said the carnival rides were statistically safer than driving to the fair, which was probably true, but it felt wrong coming from him. The family agreed to keep quiet and spent the rest of the night using their free passes. After they left, Frank came over and told me and Marcus that if anyone asked, the door malfunction was a one-time mechanical failure that had been immediately fixed. We were not to mention that this was an ongoing problem or that we'd been watching for it. He said our jobs depended on keeping this simple and not creating drama. I quit 2 weeks later. Couldn't handle watching that ride every night, knowing those doors could pop open again. Marcus quit too. When I turned in my equipment, Frank acted like nothing had happened and said I was welcome back any time. I heard through other carnival workers that they finally fixed the zipper door latches the following season, but only after someone complained to the state inspector. Apparently, a family from a different fair had reported a similar incident, and it triggered an investigation. I think about that girl a lot. She trusted the ride was safe, trusted that we checked everything properly. She had no idea she was getting on a ride that we knew was dangerous. If her seatbelt had failed too, or if she'd been smaller and slipped through it, she'd be dead. The worst part is how normal Frank made it all seem. Like covering up safety problems was just part of the business. And maybe it is. Maybe that's how all these traveling carnivals operate, and I was naive to think otherwise. I still go to local fairs sometimes with my own kids, but I never let them get on the rides. I know too much about how things really work behind the scenes. Every time I see a zipper or any other spinning ride, I wonder what problems the operators are watching for and whether management actually cares about fixing them. This happened last summer at the Douglas County Fair in Colorado. I'm 19 female and was there with a group of friends from college. We'd been looking forward to it for weeks. It was one of those big county fairs with lots of rides, games, live music, the whole thing. We got there around 6 p.m. on a Saturday. The place was packed, which we expected. Families everywhere, teenagers hanging out, couples on dates, normal fair crowd. We started with some of the rides, just the basics, tilt-a-whirl, bumper cars, that kind of thing. Just having fun, taking pictures and being loud college kids. I first noticed this guy when we were in line for the Ferris wheel. He was maybe 30, average height, wearing a black baseball cap and jeans. Nothing really stood out about him except that he kept staring at me. Not casual glances, but full-on staring. When I looked back at him, he'd look away, but then a minute later he'd be staring again. I pointed it out to my friend Sarah, and she said I was probably imagining it. Fair enough, crowded places make everyone feel watched sometimes. We rode the Ferris wheel and I forgot about it. But then I saw him again at the ring toss game. We weren't even playing, just walking past. But there he was about 20 feet behind us. Same black hat, same intense stare when he thought I wasn't looking. This time I was sure it wasn't coincidence. I told my friends and we decided to test it. We made a sudden turn toward the livestock barns on the other side of the fairgrounds. Sure enough, Black Hat Guy changed direction too. We stopped at a random booth selling homemade jewelry and pretended to browse. He lingered nearby, pretending to read a sign about 4-H competitions. This went on for maybe an hour. Everywhere we went, he followed at a distance. Never got too close, never tried to approach. He just kept us in sight. My friends were starting to get worried too. We talked about finding security, but weren't sure what we'd tell them. Guy hadn't actually done anything wrong, just walking around the same public space we were. Around 8 p.m., we decided to try to lose him in the crowd, near the main stage where a country band was playing. We pushed through the packed audience, zigzagging between people, and came out the other side. I looked back and didn't see the black hat anywhere. We waited a few minutes, scanning the crowd, and saw nothing. We thought we'd lost him. Figured maybe he'd given up or found something else to do. We were hungry, so we headed to the food area to grab some corn dogs and funnel cake. I was standing in line at the corn dog stand when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around and it was him, Black Hat Guy, standing right behind me with this weird smile. He said something like, "Having fun tonight?" in this over-friendly voice that made my skin crawl. Up close, I could see he was older than I'd thought, maybe 35 or 40. Had this intense look in his eyes that made me want to back away. I said, "Do I know you?" And he laughed like I'd made a joke. Said we'd been running into each other all night, and he thought he should introduce himself. Gave me some name that I don't remember because I was too freaked out to process it. I told him I was with friends and turned back toward the counter, hoping he'd take the hint. But he kept talking, asking where I was from, what I was studying, if I came to the fair every year. Personal questions that felt way too intimate coming from a stranger. Sarah came over and asked if everything was okay. The guy immediately got defensive, said he was just being friendly. No harm in talking to people at a fair. But his whole demeanor changed. Less fake friendly, more aggressive. Sarah grabbed my arm and we walked away without ordering anything. We found the rest of our group and told them what happened. Everyone was properly creeped out now. We stayed together and kept looking over our shoulders, but didn't see him again for the next hour or so. Around 10 p.m., we decided to go through the funhouse before heading home. It was one of those old school ones with mirrors, dark corridors, and things that jump out at you. We figured it'd be fun and we'd stay in a group so it felt safe. The funhouse was busier than expected. Groups of people going through at the same time, lots of laughing and screaming. We got separated almost immediately in the mirror maze section. I could hear my friends but couldn't see them because of all the reflections. I was trying to find my way out of the mirror section when someone grabbed my arm from behind. It was a very tight grip. I spun around and it was him, black hat guy, standing in what looked like a maintenance alcove I hadn't even seen. No hat this time, and his whole face looked different in the weird colored lights. He looked angry. He said something like, "Stop running away from me," and tried to pull me toward the alcove. I screamed as loud as I could and tried to yank my arm free. He had a strong grip, and for a second, I thought he was going to drag me into that dark space. Then this carnival worker appeared out of nowhere. Big guy in coveralls who looked like he worked maintenance for the funhouse. He yelled something at the black hat guy and stepped between us. The stalker let go of my arm immediately and said it was just a misunderstanding, that we were friends. The carny wasn't buying it. Told the guy to get out of his funhouse right now or he'd call security. Black hat guy looked like he wanted to argue, but the carny was twice his size and clearly wasn't messing around. The stalker left without another word. The carnival worker asked if I was okay and helped me find my friends. He said people sometimes tried to use the funhouse's dark areas for things they shouldn't be doing, and he kept an eye out for problems. Said he'd been watching this particular guy acting suspicious near the entrance. My friends wanted to leave immediately, but I insisted we find security first and report what happened. We found a sheriff's deputy working the fair and told him everything. The following, the conversation at the food stand, and the grabbing in the funhouse. The deputy took it seriously and called for backup to search the grounds. They looked for maybe an hour but never found Black Hat Guy. Deputy said he'd probably left as soon as he realized we were reporting him. He took my statement and said they'd keep the report on file in case the guy showed up at other local events. We left right after that, spent the whole drive home talking about how scary it was and how quickly the situation had escalated. What started as just weird staring turned into him physically grabbing me in a matter of hours. I think about what might have happened if that carnival worker hadn't shown up. The alcove the guy tried to pull me into was completely hidden from the main funhouse path. Nobody would have seen or heard anything over the normal screaming and music. The scariest part was how entitled he acted, like I owed him my attention because he decided to follow me around. When I tried to ignore him or get away, he got angry instead of taking the hint. That's not normal behavior. I never found out who he was or if police ever identified him from other incidences. Part of me wonders if he was local to that area and knew the funhouse layout, or if he just got lucky finding that hidden spot. Either way, it was clearly planned. I still go to fairs and festivals, but I'm much more aware of my surroundings now. If I notice someone following me or paying too much attention, I find security immediately instead of trying to handle it myself. That night taught me that gut feelings about creepy behavior are usually right, and situations like that can escalate fast. The carnival worker probably saved me from something much worse than just being grabbed. I never got his name, but I'm grateful he was paying attention and stepped in when he did. This happened to me last August at a traveling carnival that was set up in the parking lot of a shopping center near Pittsburgh. Still pisses me off thinking about it. I'm 32 and had matched with this girl on Bumble. We'd been texting for maybe a week and decided to meet up at the fair. Nothing fancy, just grab some food and walk around. I got there at 7 p.m. like we'd planned, but she never showed. Waited around for 45 minutes, texting her twice with no response. I was annoyed, but figured since I was already there and hadn't been to a fair in probably 10 years, I might as well look around. Bought a beer and walked through the midway, checking out the games and rides. Kind of nostalgic, actually. It reminded me of going to the county fair as a kid. I was watching some teenagers try to win a stuffed animal at the basketball game when this woman working the ring toss booth started talking to me. She was probably mid-20s, blonde, really attractive. Not what I expected from a carnival worker, if I'm being honest. She was making jokes about how rigged all the games were and seemed genuinely funny. We talked for maybe 20 minutes while she worked. Her name was Jessica, and she said she'd been traveling with the carnival for 2 years. I asked where I was from, what I did for work, normal conversation stuff. She seemed interested and was definitely flirting. After getting stood up earlier, the attention felt good. Business was slow, so she could talk pretty freely. She mentioned that carnies don't get many chances to meet normal people, since they're always moving around. Said most of the guys who work the circuit are either much older or kind of sketchy. I was starting to think maybe getting stood up was actually lucky. Around 9 p.m., she said her shift ended at 10:30 and asked if I wanted to hang out after the fair closed, maybe grab drinks somewhere or just talk without all the noise and crowds. I said sure, and she told me to meet her in the parking lot by the Ferris wheel around 11. I killed time playing a few games and eating fair food. The place had gotten pretty busy, but started clearing out after 10, when most of the rides shut down. By 10:45, the parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few cars and the carnival workers' RVs parked on the far side. I waited by the Ferris wheel like she'd said. It was darker than I expected, only a few streetlights and most of the fair lights were off. I could see some workers still cleaning up and securing equipment, but the midway was basically deserted. Around 11:15, I started wondering if Jessica had forgotten or changed her mind. I was about to leave when I saw 3 people walking across the parking lot toward me. In the dim light, I could make out that one of them was definitely her, same blonde hair and build. But the other 2 were guys, and they were both pretty big. Something immediately felt wrong. The way they were walking wasn't casual, and Jessica wasn't calling out to me or waving like you'd expect if she was just bringing friends along. They were maybe 50 yards away, but closing distance fast. My gut told me to get to my car. I started walking quickly toward where I'd parked and heard footsteps behind me pick up pace. I looked back and saw the two guys had broken into a jog while Jessica hung back. I ran for my car and got there just as they caught up. I got inside and hit the locks, right as the first guy reached my window. One guy was yelling something about me bothering his girlfriend. The other was trying to grab my door handle. They started banging on the car and trying to open the doors. The bigger guy was hitting my driver's side window with something, maybe keys or a small tool. I was afraid it was going to break, so I started the engine and threw it in reverse. As I backed out, they kept hitting the car, and one of them kicked my rear quarter panel. I could see Jessica in my headlights just standing there watching. She wasn't trying to stop them or acting like this was some misunderstanding. She looked calm, like this was exactly what she expected to happen. I peeled out of there and drove straight to the nearest police station, filed a report with the desk sergeant and told him the whole story. He seemed to take it seriously and said they'd send someone to check it out, but it was already past midnight, and he wasn't sure anyone would be available until morning. I gave them Jessica's name and description, plus what I could remember about the two guys. The sergeant asked if I thought they were trying to rob me, and honestly I wasn't sure. They never explicitly demanded money or my wallet, but what else could it have been? The cops called me 2 days later to say they'd gone to investigate, but the carnival had already moved on. The shopping center manager said they'd left Sunday morning, which was the day after this happened. The detective said this wasn't uncommon. Traveling carnivals usually have set schedules and can't stick around when problems come up. He also mentioned that this kind of thing wasn't entirely unusual. Said they'd had reports before of carnival workers setting up locals for robbery or worse. Usually it's someone working games or food stands who strikes up conversations with people who seem to have money, then arrange to meet them after hours when there are fewer witnesses around. The detective thought Jessica had probably targeted me because I was alone and seemed like an easy mark. Middle-aged guy by himself at a fair, dressed decently, carrying cash for games and food. She might have assumed I had a nice car or wallet worth taking. What bugs me is how good she was at it. The conversation felt completely natural, like she was genuinely interested in talking to me. If I hadn't gotten that bad feeling when I saw the three approaching, I probably would have walked right up to them. I keep wondering what would have happened if I hadn't made it to my car in time. Best case, they just wanted my wallet and phone. Worst case, they had something more violent in mind. The fact that Jessica stayed back while the guys did the dirty work makes me think this wasn't their first time. I reported it to the state police too, in case they could track down which carnival it was and where they were heading next. Never heard back about whether they caught up with them or if anyone else reported similar incidences. I'll probably never go to another traveling carnival. The whole experience made me realize how easy it would be for someone to just disappear if something happened to them in a situation like that. Really hope they eventually got caught trying this on someone else, or at least that other people are smarter than I was about trusting strangers at these kind of things. You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radeon production brought to you by Spoopy Cola.